Long time no see. I'm going to preface this video by letting you know that I am using my tablet's microphone with this, and unfortunately that just means the audio is far worse than ever, and it was probably always this bad. But please bear with me, and I am sorry. Today's video we are discussing the idea of establishing your character's aesthetic. But first, what is the definition of aesthetic? Adjective, concerned with beauty or the appreciation of beauty. Noun, a set of principles underlying and guiding the work of a particular artist or artistic movements. For this subject, both are hand in hand, but our concern is about the noun and not so much what's pleasing to the eye. And please remember, I am most definitely not a professional, and the following is entirely my opinion and what I do. This is not a must-do. If the following proves useful to you, that is great. If it doesn't, and it's not your cup of tea, that's more than fine. Regardless, I hope you enjoy the video. So, today we are looking more at the principles underlying your character, as well as how said principles can affect the presented beauty and choices. This means that finding an aesthetic for a character is more than just simply trying to find a style that suits them, even though let's admit it, that is an important part. This character will be defined by the aesthetic and the style, just like how superheroes are defined by their colors or symbols. But I should explain that when I say define, I don't mean that this becomes their personality. I just mean that this look, the aesthetic, the style that's chosen, is something that the readers will take note of and associate with the character. And while it's definitely not a permanent marker like a symbol is to a superhero, it's still considered something of a recognized trait, or you could even say iconic. My personal experience would be one of my characters, which is Hel from Scorn. She was often sketched in, drawn in, this very elegant, low-cut black dress with a leg slit. But in the comics she didn't get it until chapter 4, and when she finally did get it, there was a little bit of a celebration on Twitter, or if you prefer to call it X, then it's X. But finding the aesthetic of your character is more than just the outfit. It's also how it will affect their shape, their personality, their silhouettes, and how the readers will identify them. When I was working on my new comic, and this character who you see on screen, Cordelia, I knew 3 things about her. 1, she is a detective, which this does affect her style. 2, she is soft yet daring, which affects how she poises herself. And 3, she is a professional, which affects 1 and 2. But the main thing to know is your comic setting. Whether a custom setting or a traditional one, it's best to know the atmosphere of your story before defining your characters. But of course, depending on how you are as a creator, you can always have it where your characters define the world around them. And often that is the case. Often we make up a character and we like what they're wearing, so we decide to shape the world around them to reflect their style and their choices of attire. And that's kind of how I actually started this new comic. I knew that I did not want to be modern at all, but I also did not want to be restricted by a time period, so that just meant I could lean more towards a vintage look, but not have to worry about what is historically accurate and what isn't. But with defining Cordelia's aesthetic, I kept in mind that she's a detective. But she's the kind of woman who is always on the clock, and because of this, she's probably going to be spending most of her time in well-kept clothes that fit her style and profession. But what is her style? I decided I wanted her to give her a very vintage scholar vibe, possibly leaning towards dark academia. Knowing her aesthetic and what I wanted for her did help with researching reference for potential outfit as well as poses. Her outfit would be one that would be similar to Sherlock Holmes, but dainty. Because, let's be honest, the skirt is really cute and Sherlock Holmes wished he looked this good. But she's also a well put together woman. Most of the time she is poised and elegant, but mind you, she's not uptight. She's rather relaxed, well behaved, but daring. Which brings me to the next subject. Sometimes the personality of your characters could affect their aesthetic, or maybe their aesthetic might help shape their personality. That's why finding one that speaks to you and the character can make a difference in the world of your comic. Almost like Dungeons & Dragons, there are things that your character would do and wouldn't do, but depending on the situation, there will be a time where acting out of character makes sense. I feel like this is slowly turning into more of a shaping your character's personality than it is about finding the completion of your character's aesthetic and style and choices, but like I said previously, these two do go hand in hand, and it'll be entirely dependent on how you perceive this as a creator and what you decide to do as a creator. But let's move on. So there are 3 questions. Question 1, what aesthetic should I go with? Question 2, how do I know if this is the right one? And question 3, what if I want to change it down the line? And we will tackle these questions one by one. So with question 1, what aesthetic should I go with? Just like I said before, there are things you should take into account. Is what you're after going to fit into the world of your making? Is this something you can see your character wearing day in and day out? You have to make sure this is something you're comfortable with and it isn't out of place. You wouldn't put someone that's wearing a jeans and a t-shirt into an 1800s movie, would you? Probably not. Unless it's a time traveling movie, then yeah, that can work. But if you want a cohesive atmosphere throughout your story, this is something to take note of. And don't forget that what you choose should mesh well with your character, which that brings me to question 2. How do I know if this is the right one? The answer to this will be very similar to question 1, but the best way to find out is to honestly just draw your character in it. Draw your character in it, and is it something that you envision them in every day? Is it something that you like? Is it something that your character likes? Is it something that your character would choose? That is something to keep in mind. And also don't forget, what is the personality of your character? It's very doubtful that you would find a woman who is not afraid to show her body and clothes that cover up. I wasn't really sure how to phrase that, but I guess that one actually fits perfectly. Personally, I like tight-fitted clothes, but I don't like to wear clothes that are revealing, so I would probably just wear clothes that I feel comfortable in, but that are nicely fitted. And you have to think of your character. Does your character like to show off their body? Do you think they would wear tight-fitted clothing, but do you think they'd want to keep, their assets a little secret? That is something that you should think of. And our last question, what if I want to change it down the line? So I'm going to give my personal experience with my comic and other things for this question. In my comic Scorned, I introduced Annie as this sweet and confused girl who is struggling to accept her vampirism. She's mostly quiet due to the unfamiliarity of having supernatural women in her life, but she is often seen in bright colored clothes, and this is at the very beginning. But when time progresses a little further, we start to see there is a slight change, and by slight change, I don't mean it happened slowly, I mean kind of one day recently, as you guys saw, she wore black and dark clothes, and she did some very naughty things. And you could say it's because she's going through a phase, which is very possible. She decided to wear dark clothes during the darkest point in her life. And that is the best way, I think, to present a change in your character style, and by style I mean aesthetic, and by aesthetic I mean how they carry themselves, their personality, their choices of clothes, all of that. And if you need an extra example, this is something I had to actually act out because this is part of the D&D session I'm in, but in this session, or in this campaign I should say, I am playing a lawful good cleric. My cleric has always been very sweet, very kind to people, but she accidentally committed a crime, and by crime I mean she murdered someone, and it was a complete accident, just so you know. I, as a person, was not trying to do this, and I know her as a character would not intentionally try to kill someone. But needless to say, after that, the god that she follows did not appreciate this very much, and had reached out to her to not only shun her, but basically, I don't want to say disown, because those are not the words that escaped my DM's mouth, but let's just say she did not approve of my character's actions. But let's rewind a bit. Where was my character during all of this? What happened prior to this? prior to committing this crime, my character had been tossed into a forest of unimaginable evil that was at every corner. Wherever you went, there was chaos, destruction, death, and just pure evil. And during this whole time, not once did the goddess reach out to offer my character some comfort. My character, who is a lawful good woman, who is sweet, was thrown into a world that she never wanted to be a part of. And she was never offered any comfort or any reassurance that she's going to be okay. So when finally she commits a crime, which was an accident, and even though it was an accident, it was awful, I do agree, it was still not something she wished to do. Then finally, that's when her goddess reaches out. So at this point, my character, sort of in a spiteful way, decides that she doesn't want to follow her goddess anymore, and she turns to a new god. A god of chaos and evil, and a god that offered her comfort when she needed it. And needless to say, after this, she was a whole new woman. Her once golden and silver armor had gone black, her once red hair had gone white, and her once gorgeous blue eyes had gone red. In case you guys need to know, or if you have already figured it out, she turned to Lolth. Lolth is the goddess of chaos and evil, and she is normally a goddess praised among drow elves, and my cleric is not a drow elf, but let's just say she definitely looks like one now. But the point I was trying to make with this whole story that I gave you is that depending on what you want to change, you need a good reason for it. If it's just a style choice, like you just want to switch out their wardrobes, we could just chalk it down to your character wants to try out new clothes, or you as a creator want to see your character in new clothes. But if you're going to change who they are as a person, you need a good reason. And you need to make sure it makes sense, because from a creator standpoint, you can do anything you want, but from a writer standpoint, you should think about what you do, because you want to make sure your readers understand why it is you're doing what you're doing. And maybe they don't have answers now, but they should have answers somewhere soon, or somewhere down the road. I forgot how words are said. But that's kind of the whole premise of this video. Is premise the right word? I don't know. Does it feel natural? Is this something you're happy with? Is this something your character can be seen in day in and day out? What is it that you want to do? What is it you're trying to accomplish? What is it that you want your character to represent? And how do you want to represent your character? At the end of the day, you are the god of your creations, and you decide what goes. I hope this helped you, and if it didn't, then I hope you find what does. Don't stop trying to improve yourself and your creations. I hope you have a great day, and thank you so much for watching.